If there's anything that is going to factor in my decision on buying a game, it's that the game looks great. And I don't even care if the game itself doesn't look great. As long as it looks great on the box, then I'm sold.
Well, I guess if you're going to talk about video games as an art form, then why not just simply hang it up on the wall?
I do that. You haven't been to my house lately.
I don't think I've been to your house ever.
Yeah, I don't invite people to my house. My house is like the top north corner of the city. It's not practical. I mean, if you live in the area, which is...
Obviously you do.
Yeah, obviously I do, and some of my friends do. In fact, I think a lot of the reason why I'm still friends with a lot of my friends was just proximity.
Mm.
Yeah, that was sarcasm, most of that, but I actually do like the idea of hanging a bunch of games on a wall, especially the ones that had really good artwork.
Mm-hmm.
But that does transition, even haphazardly, into today's subject. Clearly, we care about presentation. Clearly. So, let me first start off by defining presentation for the masses, which is to say the one person that is currently talking to us on the comments board. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the one person, I guess, who isn't our friend, so we shamelessly link.
Remembered his name, or rather his YouTube name. I think there was numbers in there. Presentation is how much it looks like the creators gave a shit.
Yeah, I can say that.
Now, a game creator can be skilled at making a game that's fun to play. And I think on some level, if your game isn't fun or compelling or interesting or engaging, you've already failed, and it doesn't really matter how the game looks.
Yeah.
So gameplay, like, say, when you're watching a comedian, you expect the comedian to be funny first, is the most basic expectation.
Games are an interactive medium. If the way you interact with it is broken, then it itself is like if you were
the rest of it is pointless.
If you make art that hangs on a wall and then decide to put curtains in front of the art, then you've presented it very poorly, and you can't really blame the audience for not being able to adapt to it.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you've put it, say, in an ornate frame that's prettier than the artwork, and then it's become a distraction, and now people aren't even focusing on it. Presentation doesn't just impact video games, it impacts basically any form of expression or any form of media. If yours isn't, if it doesn't look the way that the product should look, or if it doesn't look the way that the creator is intending to make it look, then as a work, it is, I mean, it can't always be a failure, but it's definitely not a preferable experience.
I think when you talk about presentation in games, it probably goes, like, I think what a lot of people think when you say presentation in games, probably thinking art style and things like that. But I think we could even take it a step further and talk about the interface, the heads-up display, things like that. I guess just one of the examples, and I know I keep bringing this up, and I'm actually feel sort of stupid for bringing it up again, but I'm going to, say Assassin's Creed is a game that basically it's supposed to look like it actually is a historical place, but then the heads-up display is very clearly computer-generated because, again, it's a game within a game, so to speak, or a story within a story. So you have an entire world that looks and feels the part, but then you've got these little bars up here which represent your sync rate, and your little icon down here that represents you have a sword, and it's very noticeably computer efficient.
But that ties into Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, it's part of it.
It's done deliberately because it's the balancing of the historical with the modern technology. So in that regard, it works. Another way that we could define presentation is how well the game in its entirety embodies the original intention. And a great example of this that you can do to test whether a game you're playing with is how good the game is if you're just standing still. Think about that for a second. Think about like an adventure game, and you just stand in the middle of nowhere, and there's music playing, there's ambience, there is maybe a day-night cycle. Your character is maybe kicking the grass a little bit, or some characters actually sit down, and that's the best chance to get a feel for how well this game can actually behave itself when it's just standing still.
Ah, this room. What a lovely room. Truly, it was good that we stopped and we shot our episode this
definitely room. Worth the detour.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, a man can love a room.
Yeah, maybe we're going on a little bit too much for the room.
But the Stanley Parable, for those of you wondering what that reference was, but there is an example of a game that at times seems to really not want you to stand still. Stanley stood here for another few moments and eventually decided he was going to move. Stanley walked into the broom closet and decided to stand there and do nothing. I'm paraphrasing the narrator, but
Clearly, the player is dead. Hello, could someone replace the player so that we can move on with the story?
The broom closet ending is our favorite ending.
Yeah.
But one of the most interesting things that I picked up from the Stanley Parable was that first time it asks you to go either left or right through the door, and I stood there for a while on my first go through, really thinking about what did I want to see first, what decision would I have made. So it took a while, and I noticed that nothing else was happening. The room was humming faintly because there's the fans, but the narrator didn't say anything. It was just you making your decision. And I thought this is a great example of, I think, what the Stanley Parable wants to accomplish, because it wants to tell you a story, but at certain intervals, make you question what decision you're going to make next and what you care about. Do you care about Stanley? Do you care about the story? Or do you care about your own selfishness? And do you want to just push the narrator's buttons, so to speak? A bad example of this, and I almost hate that I keep using Bioshock Infinite as a negative example, but only so much as that game promise was going to be something else. Anyways.
Well, I think Bioshock Infinite has been praised to the point of excess, to the point of possibly meta-elevating game. Like, I remember you mentioning the whole idea of every time you die, you're not... Well, you died in this reality, and now when you load your save file, it's implied you're in a different reality.
And that was a great way of commenting on the nature of a game character. Because most other games would have just started and stopped, and nothing would have happened, and you would have had to make that conclusion yourself. Bioshock Infinite took the duty to show you that this is actually still part of the game environment.
Yeah, so just that game, again, as a commentary on other games, as potential unto itself, has been praised to the point where I think we can poke it once in a while, and it's not going to damage.
Yeah, I mean, I poked it a couple of times. I just wish there was another standout example, but I also pick the games that I use as examples carefully, because I try to think of games that people have either played or at least have heard enough about that they know what I'm talking about. So what happens is when you're walking around town, especially in the early parts of the game, and you come across other people that are standing around, you would walk past them and they might say something. And then if they're finished their conversation and you're still there, well, then they just stand idle. And some of them might actually turn to look at you and be like, but that's it. And so there's an example of presentation where the game was expecting you to do A, but it didn't have anything prepared if you had selected option B. So you can actually play the game much more enjoyably if you don't stop and stand there and stare at them, if you're actually walking along, like what I think the game expects you to do. But in that situation, I think the developer should have taken some liberty to at least come up with something that would happen if the player decides to just stand there. But they didn't. So that's not a great example of a presentation, because it's miscommunicated.
Well, I think if we're going to talk about sort of like idle conversations and that kind of stuff, the biggest thing you could probably poke that already has a ton of holes in it would probably be Skyrim. I mean, they had conversation generators, and you could stand there and listen to a conversation, and like, this is just... They're obvious. It's obviously not a conversation. They're just spouting their lines back and forth at each other. Like, two people walk up, say like, this world belongs to the Norns. I used to be an adventurer. This world belongs to the Norns. I used to be an adventurer. I like swords. Welcome to Terria. I like swords. Welcome to Terria. And then they just walk off. Like, that, at least to me, was completely stupid, because it was so easy to just stand there and watch it. And it would be so easy just to make algorithms or preset conversations. You can have anybody just write standard conversations. Even just be two people come up to each other. It's like, have you been up to the north? It's like, yes, I was just there a week ago. Oh, what was the weather like? I was gonna, I'm doing a shipping trade up there. It's like, you should probably want to bring a jacket. Thank you. And okay, that would have been a little silly, but at least it would have been an actual back and forth.
Well, I like that idea because if they had used it as an opportunity, knowing that the player is going to stand there and listen to conversations, then they could have used it as a way to maybe hint at a quest. For example, It says, I was going to go get milk from the milk cave, but the milk cave was full of the milk spiders, so I haven't gotten any milk from there lately.
Damn the milk spiders.
That's if anybody wants to make a mod off of that, you're welcome.
Part of the there are lots of games that will have good idle conversations, but it's usually a matter of you're in a quest, there's these idle conversations, they enrich the atmosphere a bit, but they don't really happen naturally. I think the main reason why a lot of people poke Skyrim is because it's this whole open world, go anywhere, do anything. And here's a fun fact, people don't have to be talking to each other all the time, so you don't have to have an algorithm that says, these two people must now interact, they are now interacting, this is an interaction. This probably also could represent sex, never mind.
That's like 3 people going at it at the same time.
Oh, you've never done that before?
Well, apparently I miss out.
But you can have that. It's just, it takes a lot more writing. And again, because it's an open world, it's constantly generating them. I think Infinite, while still having some ability to walk around in various directions, it was, I think, it was a lot more focused.
It was linear.
It was linear.
Linear, but it's still dense enough that you could at least go visit other things and spend a little more time there. And you usually were rewarded for that. You would get some extra ammunition, or there'd be a trash can full of delicious edible food, that kind of thing.
I always find it weird when games do that. It's like, why are you throwing out perfectly good bullets in a nutrient bar that I can use to restore energy?
Yeah, but that brings me to another point, is that it's those little details too that do tie into presentation, because it might not seem like a big deal, but when the little details have been overlooked and they do start to add up, you do walk away with a less than satisfactory experience. And I'm talking about things like if a character is trying to walk from the one side of the room to the other, and they walk through a table. It's not huge, but depending on how hard you've worked to immerse the player to begin with, a little thing like that will essentially render a lot of your work useless.
Yeah, and there's always the bugs, the little things here and there, the problems. I'm going to, again, bring up Brotherhood. I apologize about think about it this way. If you ever do a stealth mechanics episode, I can bring up Assassin's Creed a lot. But there were a lot of moments in Brotherhood where you could summon assassins. You could actually see them appear out of nowhere, come in, and a lot of times they would try to run away by just running into a wall. I'm running into a wall. It's like, there goes my immersion. And there's one time where I summoned a horse. So I did the whistle thing, I hear a little click plop, but I can't find it. So I turn around and walk into basically this little roomed area, and there's the horse. The horse was summoned in the middle of a tiny room area where both the exits are too small for a horse to get out or in. So how the hell did the horse get in there to begin with? And secondly, I can't really get him out of there, can I? I have to run to a different location and resummon the horse. And how did he get in there?
Man, there was this one time we were playing, speaking of games that have stealth in it, as a precursor to, because now we're going to do that episode, but it was the first Splinter Cell game. Like the original Splinter Cell, and there's a
back when the TV ads gave him this third eye for some stupid reason.
Hey, that thing was super useful. Also, it was like 3 eyes. He was like,
well, no, I mean there was actually a television ad where he had the thing on his head, but then he still had a third eye on his forehead. Like they made it look like when he puts it on him that he's got a third eye looking through the third spot there instead of doing the rotating thing.
I'm gonna have to take your word on that one, because I do not see myself going onto the computer and looking that up. I'm just going to forget. But there was a guy sleeping on a bed. Sam Fisher sneaks in, all stealth-like, and can shoot the guy. And so Sam Fisher shoots the guy in the face, the guy stands up. And my brother turns to me and says, "Joseph, are you sure you want to be a game developer?" Sometimes it's hysterical, and sometimes it's like that moment in the original Star Wars where one of the stormtroopers bangs his head up against the sliding door. Not that I can relate to that, but that is something that is kind of a gift a little bit because it's humorous. It wasn't intentional, but it doesn't hurt. The difference is in a game when something like that happens, it does actually hurt. It might not deal a ton of damage. It might not deal massive damage. I was going there.
Yeah.
But it certainly does deal a little bit of damage.
Back to Skyrim, that someone did a huge art thing for someone who's in bed. They talk to them, so they get up. It's like, hello, sir. But then another NPC comes by, sees an unoccupied bed, so they get back down. You say, it's nothing. They get back in the bed. Now you get these two guys spooning each other. You think they noticed that? Oh, wait, did you just lie down in the bed while I was gone? Yes, well, I saw the bed unoccupied. Oh, well, this is my bed. I'm going to lie down here, too. Well, we can
do
share.
a whole thing on things that happen in Skyrim that are funny. Like a bunch of Nords kick the crap out of me and kill me. And then after I'm lying on the ground dead, they start wandering around like nothing happened. And then one of them is standing close to me and says, "Yes, is there anything I can help you with?" Well, you could have started by not killing me. That would have been great.
Let's not forget the infamous dragon who was killed by a bear. Dragon randomly spawns. The dragon level matches. Oh, you're level 1? Oh, that's a bear. Oh, shit.
Yeah, or the giant that smashes his mace down and then you fall upwards into the sky. It's an anti-gravity mace, apparently.
Did you ever actually hear about the Pathfinder cat thing? Okay, peasants in Pathfinder have 1 health. Cats deal 3 damage with a claw attack.
So a cat can kill a peasant in Pathfinder?
It's like you just unleash a wave of cats and they just kill everybody who doesn't have a name.
I have no idea how much of a campaign idea I'm getting right now. The cat menace. Was because if each cat deals 3 damage and you collect like 100 cats, that's a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're still cats. You can still kill them with a fireball. But why would you want to?
At the end of the campaign, you get a choice. Door A, you have to fight 100 regular-sized cats, or you have to fight one gigantic cat with the power of 100 cats.
It's kind of like that whole thing. Would you rather fight the Hulk?
That's
Hulk's
exactly,
equivalent mass in bees.
Definitely bees.
I'd say bees because then you could just break out the flamethrower and call it a night.
Yeah, the Hulk would crush me. It's ridiculous. All right, so
but this
what I want to talk about is how presentation also ties into gameplay, because I think so far we've just been kind of talking about the visual impact that we get as players.
Well, I think presentation also, I think, has a lot to do with art style. You can take something like Borderlands, which is a sort of comedic series, and you look at them, like, it's all cel-shaded, it looks like very comic booky, all the characters are very exaggerated. I mean, they even designed for Borderlands 2, they wanted to create a female character who just went against all these typical tropes for a female character, and they create Elsie, who, surprisingly enough, every female I've played Borderlands 2 with has just refused to interact with. Every time we have a quest or something that involves Elsie, it's like, Matt, you do it. You talk to her. I don't want to look at her. For those who don't know, she's basically... You can't even live. You'd break your legs. You'd break your legs by walking. Not healthy. Yeah, God damn. Like, I get what they were trying to do, but you're right. It's not healthy. I mean, there's a certain point where, yes, metabolism can give you a large body, but once you're past that, it's just you don't give a fuck about your own life.
Yeah.
But
how's there this much food to go around? Isn't this supposed to be an apocalyptic wasteland?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, that's actually a very good point. But anyway, the point is, again, it's a comedic game. All the characters are very heavily exaggerated. People who are authoritative have very rectangular jaws, and there's, claptraps, which, dear fucking God, I just want to kill all the claptraps.
Yep.
Kill all the claptraps.
Matt, focus.
Yes. And so, you can look at it and know right off the bat that they're having fun, that they're, being silly. I think another, whenever you talk about art style, you have to talk about Okami. That was something that was meant to look like the very old... I forget, there's a specific name for that art style, but I'm not quite sure. It's the one...
Well, it wasn't... my gut reaction was going to be watercolor.
Yeah, well, watercolor is not a bad one, but the specific art style and the way people were designed are based on something from feudal Japan or
Okay.
those areas, and the whole thing did look like a storybook come to life, and that is what they were doing. And even just who you were as a kami, like you're supposed to be the sun god or some variant of the sun god. I'm not quite sure why the sun god needs to gain levels and buy items and learn powers.
Hmm.
And I thought one of the neatest features of the game was when you ran, flowers sprouted behind you. Like, it did nothing gameplay wise. It didn't really change, again, the game at all, but just you would run along and just you'd have flowers growing in your wake. Your very footsteps fertilized the earth and caused life to spring anew. And it's actually really funny because then some people worked in that game went and made Bayonetta, and when you turn to leopard form and run around, you actually cause flowers to sprout up behind you. They look a little more, evil, but it's still like, okay, I get it. There's a nod.
Yeah. Since I don't get to say positive things about Sony games enough, I thought like Shadow of the Colossus
Oh,
was
yeah.
an example of a game that was just outstandingly beautiful. And
It didn't even need an HD version.
not really, no. I mean, the art style was great for that. And where this can tie back into the actual game design is that a lot of times the graphics will have to maybe sacrifice a little bit depending on the game that they want to make. One example of a game where I think presentation basically defined the series was Silent Hill. For those of you who aren't familiar with this particular situation, the original Silent Hill was a PlayStation release, and they can only render so much of the town before they started to experience a lot of lag.
The PS1 lit on fire.
Yeah. So usually what you would do is you would have draw distance where things at a certain amount of distance away from you wouldn't actually render until you got that much closer. And they did do that, but they were able to hide it by having this immensely thick fog covering the entire town. So you would have to wander through the fog, which actually did increase the sense of dread that the horror game was going for.
Yeah.
And it helped add characteristic to the town, and basically like it did sort of put Silent Hill on the map. Now this is what this game was about.
Yeah, and the fog has become incredibly iconic, and it's also just it's an amazing mechanism unto itself because you can see your immediate surroundings, but the idea that if it weren't for this fog, you could stare off in the distance and holy shit, there's a bobblehead, it wants to kill me. But because of the fog, you have to get within a certain range to notice it, so all of a sudden you can be ambushed from what typically would be a comfortable viewing distance away. I mean, even if you take out a flashlight, you would be able to see these things at a distance, but the fog means that every step you take could reveal something that, again, you normally would be able to see, but now you can't, and now it's trying to kill you.
Yeah. And as a creator for the game, you are challenged. How are you going to be fair to the player to, in some situations, warn them against threats that they can't see coming? Obviously, it's a horror game, so a lot of the threats are going to be jump scares, but they did the radio. And sound does not take up nearly as much graphical prowess as the actual graphics itself. So a radio that starts freaking out whenever somebody is nearby, not only does that serve you as a player in that, oh, well, now I gotta be on edge, but it does increase attention because that will make you wonder where is it going to come from. I don't know. It's foggy. I can't see anything. So one of the things is that now that technology has progressed so far along, it's much more difficult now to use those kind of limitations as inspiration. Like if you wanted to make that same game on the PlayStation 4 or whatever, well, at that point the fog would be an artistic choice because there's no excuse for being able to render that much of the town anyways. It would depend too on how good of the town you wanted it to be. If it was a beautifully like photorealistic town, then they might end up having to do it anyways. But the expectations are a little different, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you're inside a building, then the existence of fog is pretty silly.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, but
at that point, the fog is sentient.
It's Silent Hill. I wouldn't put it past them.
No, as a matter of fact, that's not a terrible idea. The fog that actually like travels with you.
Uh, I think there's a horror movie. Well, there is a horror movie called The Fog. There's another horror movie called The Mist, and
That one was terrible. Let's not talk about that.
yeah. Did you read the story?
The Mist?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. There was the fog. That was terrible.
Yeah. The Fog was terrible. The Mist was
Pretty good, actually. And even Stephen King went on the record to say that ending was better than the one he thought of.
Yeah, and they created a new ending just for that one. But yes, I think in general, a lot of comments people have been making about modern games is that a lot have been sacrificed in the name of graphics. You can see, especially, like, I think Final Fantasy 13 was lampooned a lot for this, although I think it was, like, I'm not going to say Final Fantasy 13 was great, but I really feel like people just had way too much fun stabbing it. There's a certain point where, okay, this is an issue, now you just bring up the first issue again, now you're just being petty, now you're just, okay, guys, it wasn't that bad. But it did. One of the things it did get lampooned for was that it just looked amazingly great, and that so many other features were sacrificed for the sake of graphics. And that's usually what you do at the beginning of a console generation. You have to make it look as flashy and nice as possible with no lag and all that stuff. If you have a good enough art style, for starters, you can get away with not having perfect graphics. And secondly, I do think we have gone to the point with our tastes that we don't require HDDDD graphics. We can have nice looking graphics, and then as long as everything else is fine, as long as the game plays smoothly and doesn't look like shit, like as long as the rest of the game is fine, you can have last gen graphics, and no one's really going to complain about that.
Well, and if you want your game to look good too, sometimes it's not about how much detail there is on this wall that you're standing in front of. It's detail relative to the amount of things on screen. Like, I would say that Minecraft is a beautiful game.
Absolutely.
And it looks like a 16-bit Super Nintendo game, but fully rendered in 3D. But you can see so far into the distance, and you can create basically anything you want with so many different colored materials that everything will look spectacular anyways. And even just like the randomly generated terrains look great.
Yeah, and I think one of the nice things about Minecraft, especially aesthetically wise, is that it's very easy to identify everything. This is clearly stone.
Yeah.
There is no denying it. It is solid. It is this color. It is stone. This is clearly wood. There is no denying it. Like, you can glance at it and have an idea. These are trees. This is dirt. This is stone. Oh, look, there's a bit of coal there.
Yeah.
It's all very simplistic, very easy. And it looks beautiful, but it's also very easy to interact with. This contains coal. This is obsidian. You're probably going to need a diamond pickaxe. This is magma. Stay away. Don't touch. This is water. Pour water on magma to get it. Shit. Okay. Magma on water is stone. Stone. Okay, so yeah, that gets you obsidian.
Oh, I was just working the science out in my head.
Water. Is it water on magma creates stone? Yeah, water on magma creates obsidian. Magma on water creates stone.
Hard stop.
Okay, that's legit.
Yesterday night, we had started playing The Evil Within on the PlayStation 4. And now this isn't a criticism of it, only because we played it for like 20 minutes, and I wasn't even there for the intro. We just picked up where we left off. And it's an exterior area. It reminded me a lot of the exterior from Resident Evil 4. Like in that opening zone. A lot of people made that comparison. I wouldn't be surprised if this was actually going to turn out to be Resident Evil 4 ad nauseum, which isn't the worst thing to copy in the world, because Resident Evil 4 is a terrific game.
Yeah, except, let's be honest, the opening sequence and all that other trailers, etc., was giving us a very different idea.
Oh, man. You should have seen the trailers before the trailers. There was an even more of a different idea.
Oh, yeah, like that was... They were putting people in suits, and it was all... It reminded me a lot of the movie, with how The Ring actually showed a copy of the movie that they had in The Ring?
Yes.
Well, it was the original trailers for Evil Within was reminding me a lot of those.
All right, so where was I? Oh, yeah, so this event triggers where about, 50 of these monsters with spikes coming out of their heads start chasing after our main character. And we make a run for it. And hypothetically, my buddy Josh says, "So, what would you do in this situation?" And I notice that there's a cliff wall over here, and there's actually these stone block shaped things that are kind of forming a staircase along the wall. Not like a staircase, but it looked climbable by a human.
Parkour.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, I would climb up that, get some high ground. Hopefully these things can climb. So we go up to the wall, and we can do nothing of the sort. Completely impassable. So we turn around and accept our fate. There's an example of a situation where it may have looked great, and if I were actually there, I definitely would have wanted to have climbed that, but it just didn't make sense to me that they would go through so much trouble to have this terrain and then not be able to use it whatsoever, especially because it was technically a great idea when you're being chased by a bunch of things. So now, why is this so bad, and why is this actually detract from gameplay? Well, aside from invisible walls do detract from gameplay regardless. I understand they're necessary.
Why? Why is there an invisible wall? Why?
We run to it, we can't get up to it, so that means whatever we're supposed to have done,
you've now lost the time you need to do it.
Yeah. And it's like, well, whatever I'm going to do is still going to make less sense than if I just climbed up this thing, because this is clearly a good idea.
Well, I think to a certain extent, like, I don't think The Evil Within is an open world game.
It's not. I don't think it is either.
Yeah, so I think there is sort of limited solutions to the problems. I do know Resident Evil 4 really felt like, even though at its core it was a horror game, you couldn't really get through any situation without shooting everybody. I think there was that one scene in the beginning where you just kept shooting people until eventually they got bored and they left, and then there's the other cabin scene where you keep shooting at people, then they get bored and they leave. But everything else,
those are I don't want to say they're horde mode scenes. They're just like survive until the clock is up kind of thing.
Yeah, but the rest of the time you pretty much had to kill everybody in the room to go on, and that's actually another thing about Dead Space is you had to kill everyone in the room to go on, because these things knew the ventilation systems, and if you tried to run away, if you tried to run to a room, grab the key card, run out, go up the elevator, you'd open up the elevator door and they'd burst out of the ventilation system. Hi, you forgot us. We feel so lonely. Here, why are you going to hurt us? We're going to stab you. And I think Evil Within, you're allowed to actually run away from fights, right? You're allowed to get out of there without having to kill everybody.
Well, we certainly tried to run.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so take it a few steps backwards. Where that was.
If you're lost, I'm just going to keep going.
Keep going.
Okay. So there's another topic that I want to discuss, and this is the difference between games that are aware of the fourth wall and games that are not. So let's use Metal Gear Solid, the original, as an example. There is a character by the name of Psycho Mantis, who is a psycho. Not really much of a mantis. They all just name themselves after different creatures. It was a whole thing.
Yeah.
And he tries to, for lack of a better term, fuck with you. So he's confusing Snake, and he takes over your friend Meryl, who you have to punch in the face.
Oh my god, violence against women in video games!
She's being possessed, though. She's being possessed.
The internet doesn't care.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I've already lost respect. That's okay. So the Colonel calls. The Colonel's like, Snake. Oh, what is it? But you got to do something about the Psycho Mantis guy. Try plugging your controller into port 2.
It never gets old. It never gets old. Oh, and in fact, the GameCube version had responses for plugging into 2, 3, and then if you plugged it into 4, like if you plugged it in 2 or 3, it's like, I can't read you. And you plug it into 4, oh my god, what are you doing?
He also would read your memory card.
Mm-hmm.
He said, he told me, you save often. You're a very prudent person. You got me. You got me pegged.
You like to play Super Mario Sunshine.
Now, once you've taken that step and you've done something that acknowledges the fact that this is no longer a self-contained story, that this is definitely a game, I I, for one, really enjoy that. So long as the characters in the game is still committed to seeing it through, as long as the game doesn't have a police officer come in and go, "This game has become too silly. Everybody has to go home right now." Monty Python reference for those of you over 20 years old. And I also like that this means that Snake has to be aware of the fact that he is a game character who is representing the movement of a player.
Metal Gear Solid is definitely good for those little fourth wall winks, like, because they do take themselves dead seriously.
But I don't see them as little subtle winks at the camera. I see a full-fledged disassociation from its own reality. And Snake is like, I am yours to command. Like, and this relationship is that way through the entirety of the game. He doesn't always talk to you, but because he's acknowledged that you are there, that now becomes true for the rest of the game.
Well, don't forget the CD case thing. It's like,
the CD case thing.
Which,
I almost forgot that when he tells Snake to plug the controller into port 2, I don't know if he does this in the PS1 version, but in the GameCube remake, Snake will turn to the game and be like, do it. He turns to the screen and he nods at you and he tells you to do it.
No, I didn't do the PlayStation version.
He does it in the GameCube version.
It was actually funny because I bought the collection, and it's, like, oh, you need to contact Meryl. Like, her whatever thing's on the back of the card. It's like, okay, back of the case. There's nothing on the back of the case. There's nothing in the... This is the special edition. They didn't put the code on the back of the case.
I had that same problem when we rented it. Because it was a rental box. And the rental box didn't have anything on it. So eventually we figured out that it was in the manual, but...
Well, I had to look it up online.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, one of the best instances sort of the Metal Gear Solid franchise of doing that kind of wink was in number 3, you find these photoluminescent mushrooms. And it's like, oh, these things glow. It's like, yeah, they're just photoluminescent. It's like, oh, so if I eat these, will they recharge my batteries? What? Well, they're electrical, so if I eat them, they'll charge the batteries. No, it doesn't really work like that. But then you eat it, and then you phone it again. It's like, hey, it worked. It recharged my batteries. Hang on a second. And you he or she put the headset down. Like, what? I was like, wait, it works. Like, it must be a placebo effect. Should we tell him it shouldn't work? Well, it's not hurting him. So I was like, yes, Snake. Eating photoluminescent mushrooms will recharge your batteries.
What was the joke from, this was an old Newgrounds cartoon. He's like, Snake, how come you never run out of bullets? And he points at his bandana. Infinite ammo.
That's in number 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that is number 2.
Well, just to say, in number 1, if you get a particular ending, you get the bandana item, which basically gives you unlimited ammo. So in number 2, when you're not playing Snake, but you meet up with Snake, it's like, like, here, take these bullets. Like, what about you? What are you going to do? Unlimited ammo.
Oh, all right then. Well, good for you.
But here, have a sword.
But yeah, I mean, you are right. Like, all the Metal Gear games have carried on that legacy. It's not just Metal Gear Solid, but...
Oh, actually reminds me. Sorry about talking about Brotherhood again. There was a cardboard box in it. I remember, getting pissed off that they had the "It's a me, a Mario" joke in Assassin's Creed 2. But Assassin's Creed's Brotherhood, over here. You walk over, it's a fucking cardboard box! And he's looking at it, then spontaneously behind, oh, it's you, Leonardo. Like, why is there a cardboard box? You can't do it! You're not Kojima! You don't know how to do it correctly!
So what you're saying is you recommend Assassin's Creed Brotherhood?
No!
Okay.
I actually recommend skipping that one.
If you were to take gameplay, presentation, and I guess replay value, where would you put? How would you sort the different aspects of a game that you care about in order of what you care about?
Well, I'd say since video games are an interactive medium in a way that's like you're not interacting in the sense that like I could be interacting at you just by looking at you.
This is true. Okay, point taken. Matt.
Okay, but video games are interactive in the sense that you are controlling events that happen in the game. So I would personally rate gameplay as the highest thing. The thing about presentation is presentation covers a lot.
When I first thought of that, I was going to break it down to graphics, sound, and I realized, wait a minute, that's all presentation. What am I saying?
Yeah, and like even as I mentioned, how the heads-up display can be part of presentation. If you have a really crappy heads-up display, either non-functional or it just looks silly, that can hurt it. Like some of the HUDs in Dota 2 just look really damn dumb. Like, a few of them look like they have a glow effect, but it's a static picture. So that can get, again, really distracting or really silly because it's a static, like, it looks like it's got frozen mid-pulsation, and that's just so. And there's another game, I can't remember it, but it had this really flowery, over-designed HUD, and I'm thinking, like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm having difficulty telling the difference between these two bars because you've just got all these extra details all over it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned Dota 2 in particular, because there's an example of the kind of game where the presentation only informs the player up to a certain point, but then there are elements to the game that you wouldn't know about unless somebody else told you about. And it's not just specific to Dota 2. It's things like secrets or cheat codes or little tricks that you can learn. And it's one of the problems that I used to have, and the reason why I never got into competitive Smash Brothers is that up to a certain point, there were moves that players started inventing that the game had no idea about. Now, if say while in the midst of development, they think they discover a really cool trick, and they go, oh wow, that was a cool trick, we can keep that. It adds some dimension to the game, and it helps improve some of the characters. But we should really take some extra effort to make sure that it's clear to the player that we meant for this to be in there. It's when in Smash Bros. Melee, for example, you could do an aerial dodge, but you can also, in Melee, you can move in the different directions from your initial point. So some of the characters were really good at jumping, dodging down, and this turned into wave dashing, where you would jump and dodge very quickly to move across the stage, and you would minimize the opportunity to get attacked, because this dodge would, of course, avoid the attack.
It's a 2D fighting game, and this dodge essentially allowed you to evade into the third dimension.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And so they got rid of that in Brawl, but Brawl had the edge guarding problem where you would be holding on to the edge, and if somebody else tried to grab it, they'd be knocked down because only one person can grab it at a time. That became part of the game. We come to Smash Bros. 4, wave dashing is no longer there, edge guarding has been taken out. So all this time... Tripping was taken out, thank God.
I don't remember ever tripping. Like, everyone kept complaining. I guess because, like, Kirby was really my main fighter, so I just spent 2/3 of my time
in the air.
Yeah.
So, but you can see how tripping, which is supposed to be even across the board, actually hurts some heroes more than others.
If the mechanic does exist, I have yet to see it, then yes, I admit it's a stupid mechanic. Yeah. But as per scientific evidence, I have not witnessed it.
And I know that I've been critical about this in the past, and I will continue to be critical about it in the future. By the way, side note, Smash Bros. 4 done a lot of really good work in balancing out the game, just saying. But I don't want to make it sound like I'm blaming the players for doing this, because I understand the play-to-win mentality, especially when it's a competition and there's actually something at stake. There is no excuse why you shouldn't be doing that. So whatever it takes to win, you do. I get that. And if there's no rules, if there's no prevention from doing it, then that makes it okay. But it's when the developer had to get rid of it in the next iteration that tells me that it was never meant to be there in the first place, which means that people were playing a different kind of Smash Brothers. They were playing, incidentally, a meta Smash Brothers. So, and this does, I guess this does tie into the discussion that we had about the meta, is that the meta is anti-presentation. The game stops being the game that they wanted you to play, and it starts becoming its own weird, sort of hyper tense competitive version of it. And I'm not against tense competition. I'm not against the game being difficult, but either one or two things. Either the developers identify all this extra crap that the players are doing and pare it down, and if the players feel that the game is being dumbed down, they're welcome to go play something else more complicated. Or, and I actually can definitely vouch for this, is the developers identify these things and decide, well, you know what? Let's show that we're on board with this. Let's add a little bit of extra flair to it. Even if all it takes is an additional animation or even a message somewhere that says this is now part of the game, it's joined the rest of the game in its entirety, and it's no longer this hidden secret that some players can use as an advantage over other players.
I think one of the best examples of that may in fact be the fade block cancel, or it's a mechanic. That may not be the right term. I'm sure there's a Street Fighter fan out there who wants to punch me. In fact, I can name a few, but it was this thing you could do in some of the original Street Fighters, where you essentially confuse the game and cause your character to reset. So this would allow you to do things like punch, but then either it's blocked or whatever, you do this weird command and your character instantly resets, so he doesn't have to wind his fist back. And you could do this to, I think, evade some abilities, and I believe it was later made into an actual mechanic, like it was easier to do with the buttons and things like that. One of my chief complaints about Mario Kart 64 is there is a mechanic you can do where I don't remember the full combination, but basically you confuse the engine to the point where they say, you know what, whatever, here you go, speed boost.
And I think that was called snaking, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah,
but they essentially fixed it later because it was adding a very stupid skill cap ceiling. Like, you can be a good player, but if you don't know how to snake, which isn't an official skill in the game, you could never be as good as the professional players. And to professional Mario Kart 64 players, I say, hi, 2014! In fact, specifically, October 31st, 2014.
Right. Yes, today is Halloween, and that we're shooting, but I think, according to my schedule, this thing's probably going to be up in April.
Probably.
Yeah.
Also, at the time of this shooting, which is, again, Halloween exactly, there's Christmas decorations in Indigo and advent calendars that you can purchase.
Yeah, they should have waited till November 1st. What's up with that?
Yeah.
I almost feel like this should have been something that was mentioned more in the meta episode, but in this episode, but what the hey. It's funny to me that you use the term the skill cap, because I think what this does is that it discourages players of a certain mentality from playing the game and encourages other kinds of players. The more a game requires mechanical skill, the more it's appealing to people who are very good tactical fighters, to use MMA terminology. Whereas, I cannot believe I have to use this term, but I see myself as more of an artist when I play. Like, one of the characters that I select actually are a little bit of self-expression. It's obviously not the same thing as painting a picture, but there is a little bit of putting myself into the shoes of the character and playing it from that perspective. So yes, there has to be some mechanical skill, but there's also, I want there to be the part of trying to think the way the character thinks, which is something that most games should do. When you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog, you should try to think like Sonic. When you're playing Super Mario Brothers, you try to think like Mario. And depending on the character, you know that their thought process is either super simple or overtly complicated. But by having these additional skills that the game doesn't even realize is there, it will actually impact your player base, and a lot of people will not play the game for that reason. There should be no reason why a competitive version of a game should be limiting to only a certain kind of player. It would be like if mixed martial arts only allowed people who did Muay Thai. Why call it mixed martial arts?
I just got a really funny thought. Competitive Mario Party.
See, that's funny for me for two reasons. One, because I'm in, and two, because Mario Party always starts off fun, but gets competitive towards the end of that thing. But I do like this idea, though. Let's do this. Okay, well, I, for one, am good to wrap up. I think in closing, I just want to say that if you go overboard with making the game visually appealing, you can actually send a much better message from you as a creator to your player if everything that the player can do in the game feels like it belongs.
Well, I think you have to have multiple you can't just concentrate on one specific thing. If you make a game look amazing, sound amazing, whatever, but the gameplay is flat and boring, rest assured you will lose a lot of people. I think the Alice series by American McGee or whatever, like the Madness series of Alice games, like they looked fantastic. They had a creepy sort of art style. They had this weird sort of gets under your skin, gets into your head kind of thing. But both of them kind of suffered from mediocre gameplay, and a lot of people didn't even finish the first Alice because just there were so many frustrations with it. And a lot of people for the second Alice Madness Return says, "Oh, so you've solved the problem of all these silly jumping puzzles by giving Alice the ability to jump 4 times and then glide down." That's kind of like fixing a paper cut by wrapping it in duct tape. Yes, you've done it's. So you really have to look at multiple. Like presentation really is only one aspect, and it does again go beyond just the art style. As said by other people before us, aesthetics must serve, or graphics must serve aesthetics. Yeah. Whatever graphic style you have, or whatever level of graphics, or whatever that must serve some kind of art style. It must be subservient to the overall image. Okami, to this day, even though it's a PS2 game, continues to look magnificent because they were going for
Wind Waker, World of Warcraft.
Exactly.
Beautiful Joe.
I'm gonna not say World of Warcraft. I personally just think if you have shoulder pads bigger than your sword, that's not even compensation anymore. That's you don't actually have anything down there.
I get your point, but we're just gonna have to agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah, we'll add it to the list.
Yeah.
And okay, yeah, graphic. Yeah, I think I actually just kind of made the point. It has to look like it has to look. If you're going for the watercolor, then great. If you're going for a cel-shaded cartoony style, that's great. It has to be something that serves the environment, that serves the location, that serves the whatever. Assassin's Creed can get away with a simplified computer HUD because you're in a story. You can't necessarily do that in another game that's supposed to actually take place during this time period. It would just look silly. You can't have this stuff be a distraction. It has to be a part of the world. It has to seamlessly blend in. Silent Hill, actually, as an example, the music is perfect because it blends into the background. If you were to take a Silent Hill soundtrack and listen to it normally, it would do nothing. You take the Metal Gear Rising soundtrack and you listen to it normally, it's stupid. But in the middle of a fight against this insanely huge mech, and the guitar riff comes up, and rules of nature. Like, oh yeah, I'm ready to cut this thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna go turn this camera off.
That sounds great. I think we should probably pause for the AC though. So, speaking of Smash Brothers, you want to get at it? Well, okay. It's better if one person does it because then they've got better control over it.